My name is Kevin and I'm part of the DILP alumni. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining our live stream this evening in such difficult circumstances. This event is significant not only for the first generations, but for the future generations to come. We are gathered here tonight to remember and to reflect on the sacrifices that were made from the brave men, women, and children who risked their lives for a better life. I'd like to pass it on to Celia, who will be our facilitator for this program. Celia?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Celia, and please bear with me. This is actually my first time facilitating through Zoom. So if there's any glitches, please do make sure you type in the Zoom if you can't hear me. I'd like to firstly introduce myself as Celia Tran. I'm currently the Vice President for External Affairs Portfolio for the Vietnamese community in Victoria. It's a pleasure to join you all here tonight. Just lots of familiar faces, having been a DILP alumni myself. I'd like to begin with acknowledging the traditional lands on which we meet today, pay respects to elders present, past and emerging. Would like to also acknowledge VCA VIC exec members who have joined us today, as well as advisory board members for the Dual Identity Leadership Program. A special mention to also our guest speakers for joining, who you'll hear a bit about later. And special mention to Viv Nguyen, who's joined us, who's our former Vietnamese community president for the Victorian chapter. But also like to take this opportunity to reflect myself about what today is to me, and I'd also encourage for you to do the same. Just a bit of a disclosure, it might be sensitive to many of you, it might be a very emotional journey, so if you do need to take some time out to freshen up or turn off your camera, to shed a few tears, that's absolutely okay, or if you want to do it with open camera, that's okay too. I mentioned to a few people that I do have a tissue box ready for myself in case I do shed some tears myself. Today marks 45 years since the Fall of Saigon. It's a day of sadness and sorrow for Vietnamese refugees and the Vietnamese diaspora across the world. It's a day of mourning for the lives lost during the war and after the Fall of Saigon. Those lives lost in re-education camps, at sea, at the battlefield, at refugee camps. So many lives lost. For some, it's also to mourn the loss of our country. Whilst the current Vietnam still exists, the Vietnam Cộng Hòa, or the former Republic of South Vietnam, no longer exists. All the people of the South wanted was independence, democracy, and sovereignty. No one wanted war, and it's unfortunate where we are today. I'm sure, like many of you, your families who had made the long journey to Australia or to Copenhagen or wherever you are in the world, I'm sure you all have stories that your parents have shared with you, or if you don't, you know, this is a great opportunity for you to ask some questions, to learn about the journey of the Vietnamese refugee diaspora, and an opportunity in a safe space to learn from each other. For many of us, second and third generation Vietnamese people, we've never really experienced war. We've never really experienced anything remotely close to having our freedom taken away, other than COVID-19, I suppose, and that's to stay at home. We live in a comfortable bubble and luxury of not knowing the pains and scars that we wear every day, much like our parents who do, our grandparents who do. So I hope you take some time out today, as well as after this, to reflect, and also do this every year, 10 minutes of your day to just really remember the lives lost and sacrificed for us to be here today. So now that moves on to our panel discussion time. Today we do have with us some three great speakers. So I'd like to begin by welcoming our three guest speakers, Chu Trọng Nguyễn, Cô Như Hoàng, and Viet Tran, who some of you may be familiar with. Kick off with some questions for our panelists. maybe with you, Go Như Hoang first. A few people here may not know much about the Vietnam War. You know, I know friends who don't know very much at all because their parents don't speak about it or there's not much information online. Can you give us a short snapshot into what the Vietnam War is and what the Fall of Saigon is all about?
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me to this special event of 30 tháng 4. I'm not quite sure how much do you understand the war in Vietnam. I just very quickly go through what happened to our country at that time. As you know, the Vietnam first under colonization of the Chinese, then the French, and the French lost their war to the Vietnamese in the Dien Bien Phu battle in 1954. After that, they withdrew from Vietnam. According to the Geneva Accord, in 1954, the South Vietnam allowed to travel to the north, and the North Vietnam allowed to travel to the south. That's how the war starting. This is the map of Vietnam. As you can see here is the north and this is the south. Vietnam had been divided into two parts. This is the 17th boundary. The north belonged to the communists and the south belonged to the Republic of Vietnam. According to the Geneva record, more than 1 million people from the north traveled to the South Vietnam. Just about more than 100,000 from the south traveled to the north. Unfortunately, the Vietcong in North Vietnam did not obey the Geneva Accord. They violated, and that's how the war. They determined to take over and unify the two countries. That's how the war started in 1958. To help the battle between the North and the South Vietnam, you can see here in the Australian soldier, the Korean soldiers, whilst to help the North Vietnam to combat, they have the Chinese and the Soviet Union. Even though the country are at war, but you can see this is South Vietnam. The street of Saigon, the high school students in uniform, the military women, and the medicine military school of the Republic of Vietnam. Meanwhile, in the north, propaganda media were saying that South Vietnam were living in hell, suppressed by the American, so the North Vietnam had to rescue and liberate the South Vietnam. It's very sad. They started the battle from the north, go down to the south. This is one of the events happened in 1968 in Lunar New Year. In Hue, this is very close to my hometown. They attacked people and they actually buried some alive, scholars, students in a massive grave. This is what happened after they withdrew from the country, from the hometown. You can see the skull and the bones, and the people are mourning for their deaths. And similar thing here as well. This is the heaviest casualty in 1968 when the Vietcong determined to take over South Vietnam. Lucky for us at that time, with the help from the American and the Vietnamese people, the soldier, they tried very hard to take the Vietcong out of the Hue and other province towns around that area. So the war continued until 1973, when the American signed the Accord, Paris Peace Accord, that they will withdraw their folks out of Vietnam, and the North have to stop attacking the South Vietnam. But unfortunately, after they signed a record, the North continued to attack Vietnam, and they really want to take over Vietnam as soon as they can. Unfortunately, by the 30th of April 1975, we don't have any alliance left, and the North Vietnamese finally took over South Vietnam. I stopped what happened to the Fall of Vietnam here. So you all can ask the question, or Mr. Trong, do you want to say anything? I stop sharing now.
Thank you, Go. Thank you for sharing that very comprehensive snapshot of what happened in the Vietnam War. Obviously, it's very hard to condense that within a few minutes. So if, you know, Go Như Hoang and Zhu Zhong is more than willing to connect with each one of you if you have more questions after this. I would like to throw a question to Zhu Zhong. During the Fall of Vietnam, Fall of Saigon, where did people flee, and what were their journeys like, and what was your journey like?
Probably before talking about how people flee from Vietnam in 1975, I would want to emphasize some aspects I think it's important for you to understand that the war in Vietnam is not just simply a confrontation between the North and South Vietnamese people. As you know, behind that, the North is supported by the communist kind of socialist society, especially Chinese and Russian party. Right? They support all kind of means. At the same time, the South was supported by the American, but because the war will last so long, and the American didn't have enough patience, and they aimed to withdraw, and also at the same time they withdraw all the support to the South Vietnamese soldiers. That's why we can survive longer. Okay, so in general, it's not just about the conflict between the North and South. Even the Paris Peace Accord has agreed accept the two countries at that time. They violate all the peace agreement, especially the causity motives behind this war is about the expansionism of the communist kind of society. Okay, so that's a very important point. Otherwise, you might require why we lose the war, right? Because the balance between the support between those two sides, right? Now, return to the where people flee since a short time before 30th April 1975, and even on that day, because people were panicked because the press, the publicity, and the propaganda from the North make people panic. So they try to escape, try to approach the American embassy in Saigon, and they aim to have the place in the helicopter, which can fly to the 7th Fleet in the South China Sea to escape the communists. That's one way. But as you've seen on the TV, there's crowded people. They can't sustain. And success rate is quite low anyway. That's one way they go. The second one, as you can see from the TV or material, media kind of propaganda, many people try to jump onto a ship, right? Especially military ship, and then they transfer to Philippines, and that's another way to escape. I think at that time, because the environment very chaotic, so they don't care. They didn't care where to go as long as they can escape from Saigon. Right? And that kind of aspects or thinking, it kept going on for years later. And that's why it led to the stream of the large amount of refugees who consider as both people. Yeah, at the moment, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Bác John. Yeah, Cô Như Hoàng, I'm keen to hear how the Fall of Saigon impacted you and your family, as well as Viet. You know, from a second generation point of view, what stories have your parents told you?
So this is what the Fall of Saigon. This is the last day. This is the Munich when the tank from the communists attacked the independent palace. Yeah, actually, we were very happy because my brothers still at war, and my parents did not want to leave the country. He said that if we die together. If we live, we will live together as well. So they decided to stay back instead of going to the Harvard or the Air Force to be taken out of the country. The first few weeks when the communists took over Vietnam, we were very happy because we all said we are living in peace now. All of my brother actually came back home. One of my brother, he was studying law and a Navy soldier like Chú Trọng. He was at the he went to the Navy ship by the time the 30 tháng 4, the 30th of April. At that time, he was in the territory of Malaysia and Thailand, but he decided to go back to the country because he said that I can continue my degrees to become a lawyer and I can continue to contribute into the country. But as you can see, these are the soldiers. What the Vietcong said, we are the loser. You can see that all material books belong to the Republic of Vietnam were destroyed. And similar, like you can see here. And just about 4 weeks after they took over the country, they starting to control our living lives. We could not, if you want to travel from one town to the other, you have to ask for their permission. And they call all the military officers who served in the previous regime had to attend the political session or re-education camp. And after that, even worse than I can remember that every night, or at least a few nights a week, they call to have a political meeting where they tell us that we are criminal. We and the American try to kill the people from the north. That's they use the kill, and they call it a Nguy mean it is a loser side. And my brother, he said something against the government. I remember he told me that they put water into his ears. That's it. That's the one way to punish him. At that time, we're not allowed to criticize or comment on anything of the government. We have to listen to them. We're not allowed to read or listen to any music that belongs to the Republic of Vietnam. And if we say anything against them, we will face heavy penalties. So that my mom and dad, especially my father, who was an accountant, he said that he could not concentrate anymore because the level, they told him have to prize the North communists, which he could not do it. So my mother and my parents said that we have to find a way to escape out of the country. I remember The day that we left Saigon, we moved to Rạch Giá to starting our journey. From Rạch Giá mean down to the Delcom River, we used a small boat which took us from the coastal line into the ocean, where a little bit bigger boat waiting for us. When I say a little bit bigger, but you can imagine it's very small, for over 40 people were there. Then we traveled for the 3 days. We started to run out of food and oil. There were many boat vessels passed by. We asked them for help, but they didn't help us at all. And until the 5th day at sea, we started to lose our direction. We didn't know where we were. And certainly there fish boat came very closer to our boat. They jumped over to our boat. They say something that we could not understand. Now, of course, they are Thailand fishermen. Then they move back into their boat. And just about half an hour later, the captain told us that I think that boat had returned and they are going to attack us. And the captain told all the females and children go down to the compartment underneath. Let all the men up there to fight with the pirates if they want to attack us. And certainly, I heard a very huge impact into our boat, and the pirates screaming their language, which we could not understand, and fighting. And I heard in the Vietnamese language said that bị đâm trúng rồi, mean the pirate already stabbed one of the men there, and he just fell in blood. And after they fighting, so many days we were at sea, so all the men became very, very, very weak. They had to sit down on the platform, and the Thailand, they just came over, took whatever they can, what we belong to. They check our boy to see where we have any hidden jewelry, American dollars, or any gold, so they can take with them. So after the attack, they left, but before they left, instead of killing us all, they destroyed the engine and drilled a hole into the boat. So that night, it was a very dark night. My father was injured. He got stabbed by the pirates, and he called all of us. He said that I'm not going to make it. I'm very sorry. I took you to this journey, and we won't make it to the new land. And it was so dark, blood covered the platform. It was very sad. We was exhausted and slept. When we wake up the next morning, our boat is about to capsize into the ocean already. We know that we're not going to make it. We're definitely not going to make it. And it's very lucky from far distance, a big vessel of the European, they stopped by and they looked at us. They looked at us and they agreed that they pull our boat into the refugee camp nearby. And very lucky for us that the injured man got transferred into Bangkok hospital, and lucky he survived afterward. That's how my journey started.
Thank you, Go, for sharing that really powerful story. I'm really keen to, you know, make sure that these stories are continuing to be told to second generation Australian Vietnamese background. It's a lot of times you're very brave to open up. A lot of our parents still have that trauma and can't open up. So a lot of these stories we're hearing through other people's parents. So thank you for sharing your story, Vunya. Viet, I'm really keen to hear about whether, you know, we talk about stories. Have you heard anything from your parents about their journey to Australia, and what was that like for you to hear that?
So for my family, I think the story that I've heard the most about growing up would be my mum's side of the story. So unlike my dad's side, where they were able to escape Vietnam basically just 3 years after the Fall of Saigon, my mum had to put up with the regime for a little bit longer. And because her dad, my grandpa, held a quite high position in the South Vietnamese police department, I don't know exactly what it is in English, but in Vietnamese is Trung ủy cảnh sát, làm ở tổng nha cảnh sát Sài Gòn, which I think roughly translates to like a lieutenant of the police Saigon department headquarters or something like that. So she lived a very luxurious life as a child, growing up under the South Vietnamese regime, with servants and chauffeurs and all that. And then suddenly the invasion into Saigon happened and Saigon fell and everything just got turned on its head. She was living in poverty. She had 13 siblings. Most of them were male, so were serving in the South Vietnamese army. And as you know, like Bác Trọng has actually mentioned before, these soldiers were forced into re-education camps. So now, I think at the time she was 12, 13 years old. This young 12, 13 years old had to find a way to make money, take care of her cousins and younger siblings, as well as nephews and nieces, as well as those who are being held captive in a way in these camps. And she said it was very difficult. In particular, they're issuing rice for people to obviously feed their family. However, it came with a catch. Each bag of rice, I can't remember how many kilos you get for a period of time, was actually mixed in with sand. So even though, let's say you get 1 kilogram of rice, it's really not 1 kilogram of rice, but really majority of that is sand. So you have to find ways to feed your family, try to keep everyone alive and relatively well with such a little amount of food. And she said it was very difficult for her. And as a result, she was doing all sorts of jobs. She was sewing, she was making incense for a living. But at the same time, these skills are very important to her till this day. These are skills that have made her who she is. So in some ways, she was thankful that she had the people around her that saw her situation, was very generous and very caring to take care of her and allowed her to actually work at such a young age. In terms of escaping from Vietnam, it didn't come easy either. She was tricked multiple times. People, you know, it's a time of chaos. So people would do whatever they can to take care of themselves and their family and not worry about anyone else. It's every man for themselves. So she was tricked into saying that, you know, we'll take you and we'll guarantee that you'll be safe once we leave Vietnam. But unfortunately, once they have taken the money, they ran away and left her behind, not once, not twice, but numerous times. And it was after several attempts, she was able to escape. But even then, she described it as hell because one, she was vegan, which did not help. People on there were starving, so they started to cannibalize each other, which was a sight that she said traumatized her till this day. And I could only imagine what it would be like to see other people eat each other because they are so hungry, they're so desperate to survive. And obviously she was on this tiny little boat that she said when the dolphins were next to the little boat, they were actually larger than the boat. And all they could think of is, please don't tip our boat over because we'll have no way of surviving if that's the case. Then we have the issues with pirates. So the pirates would come in, steal, what little that they have. And as well, on top of that, they would rape the woman, which I would say she's still very traumatized from seeing and hearing the cries of these women being sexually abused by these Thai pirates. But long story short, she made it to Pulau Bidong, whereas my dad made it to Pulau Tengah, which is both islands in Malaysia. And even then, the living conditions in those refugee camps weren't exactly the best. They were better than what it was while they were on a boat or living in constant fear under the communist regime. However, it was still not the salvation that they were hoping for. Fast forwarding to the future, we made it to Australia, but that's not the same for everyone else in my family. Some relatives weren't able to escape despite numerous attempts, so stayed back in Vietnam and Saigon. Some people made it their way to America, others came to Melbourne, like my family, and then there's Sydney as well. So after the war, it basically broke up many families like mine. And during that time, we don't have the internet like we do now. So it's very difficult to stay in contact with each other. And now even with such great technology now, because there had been such a disconnection, we don't really know where each and every single person is. So there are still people missing, blood-related relatives that are still missing today. As a result, when I grew up, hearing these stories and going to the VCA events and hearing more from the elders in the community like Go Như Hoa and Bác Trọng and Chu Phong and Go Phong Vy and stuff, it made me really appreciate what I have here in Australia. I am very fortunate that I have the education, the opportunities to study, to live in peace, to eat, to cry, to laugh, all of that within secure, knowing that I'll be safe, secure, and make me really want to help give back to the community, to the Australian people, to the Australia as a whole, and as countries like Australia for accepting our people during a time where all seemed lost. Like these people were leaving the country, not knowing where they're going. They had no idea if they're going to be safe, will it be successful or not. And at the same time, they were still going to risk it because it was better than nothing. If there's a glimmer of hope, they will cling onto that hope and just go for it. And I really admire that about the Vietnamese people. Absolutely. Because they will do anything for democracy, for basic human rights, for freedom. Yeah.
Definitely.
Can I just add to your comment there, Viet? You said yes, that please. your mom had 1 kilograms of rice, but in them mainly sand. I'm not quite sure why you all thought Vietnam, South Vietnam was a very rich country, especially in Delta River. With a lot of rice grow every year, why we have to starve, we don't have enough food to eat. Unfortunately, in order to punish us, they took all the rice back to the north, and that's why the south had to be suffered.
That's right. Thank you for sharing, Viet and Cô Như. Definitely, resonating with the resilience of the Vietnamese people. It's incredible, and it's a very powerful story you shared, Viet. I'm really keen to open up to the audience. Casey, I think, has asked a question.
Hi. First of all, I'd just like to thank DILP for putting together this event. I'm listening here with my sister, who doesn't really have a knowledge of Fall of Saigon yet. So my question is about how second generation Vietnamese Australians can connect to older generations, especially when there's a language barrier. So I know that personally, I really struggle to talk to my family members about this, especially when it's not something that they bring up a lot or like ever. Even on days like this, I honestly think they would have forgotten about it. So yeah, that's my question.
Cô Như chú Trọng một biết.
Yeah. I think that first of all, if you try to come to the Vietnamese community, so you get the bond, the connection with the community, and come to the event like this, and try to ask questions with the elder people, so that you can understand what have happened on that day, what are the journey they went through. Yeah, like for myself, I witnessed the communists kill innocent people in front of me, in front of our family, when I was only 7 years old. And I continued to live into the war until I left Vietnam. And as I said before, ask your parents, ask them to open, because sometimes a lot of people think this is traumatic. They want to close it, don't want to talk about it. But you just ask them, tell them what happened during that time. Try to make the connection. But I think, first of all, that you try to go to the Vietnamese community, attend a function, see a lot of people, go to DILP, the identity groups here, talk to the elder people, to myself, or Vi Chú Bon Chú Phong, yeah, to understand more. The connection will build up gradually. You don't expect it will come to you straight away like that. It have to be gradually to build
That's
up.
right.
Yeah,
it's a really good point. I might just ask a Slido question though. Someone who posted wrote, wouldn't the Northern Vietnamese people realise that they've been listening to propaganda after the war? Do they even care?
can I answer this question first? Yeah, my auntie, he has three children. The first one actually joined the communists in 1954, and her second son was in the public of Vietnam military, who later on died during the war. So after 75, he came into Vietnam, South Vietnam. My father took him around the city of Saigon. He looked at it, the big building and the people living there. He told us that I had been deceived over time. And you know what? When he came back to the North, he became depressed, that he knew that he has been deceived by the North communists. And actually, under depression, he passed away. Because he listened to our story. We're very close to our aunties, and we told them what happened. And he can see Saigon, a totally different version from what the communists said. We didn't live under suppression of the North American at all. We have enough. We could go to school. We have the right to speak. We have the freedom of speech and freedom of movement. Not like when the communists took over, they suppressed everything. So, as I say, he became very sad and passed due to depression.
Yeah. Chú Trọng, you wanted to add something?
As you know, the communist regimes pay more attention on the propaganda, and they are successful. So they have created a kind of obeyed population, even young generation, they know nothing about the outside world. They only think about, they only obey or believe what the Communist Party tell them. Okay, and that's an issue. And that's why at the moment, I believe, after taking the South and up to now, after 45 years, most people from the North, I believe they understand the real thing. But because the very strict control of the society or regime or the system or network, they can't say anything, right? Because if they say anything against the government, they will be caught straight away. And you see it's happened, a lot of people who spoke freely, and then they were caught straight after that. And that's why I believe they're successful. And that's why it's led to a society where the life condition is very poor, right? Most of them, except those who are the cadet or a member of the party, they have a chance to take money from people, from the disruption, and so on. Right? Especially at the moment, because most people, as a young people, they're afraid of to be caught, and that's why they never say anything against the government. That's the real thing at the moment. So I'm not sure whether that's what the right kind of information I provided.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, John. I think it's fair to say even now there's no real freedom of speech or that freedom of political expression in Vietnam. So speaking out against any sort of against the government or any sort of human rights approach or anything like that is considered almost treason in some ways. Is actually very dangerous. So I wouldn't be surprised if even right after the war that was implemented in the case, if anything more dangerous. I'm really mindful of time. We'll run way over time. Just a quick last final sentence from our guest speakers. If you can share with us your vision for second, third generation Vietnamese Australians, what would that be in Australia? Just a sentence. Your vision for the future generations of Vietnamese Australians. Maybe we'll start with Cô Như.
Yeah, I would like asking them continue to contribute into this great country and reach out to the community and extend your skill.
Absolutely. Beautiful. Chú Trọng.
From my point of view, I think they will be achievable, successful, and large contribution to the Australian society, because they willing to learn, they're willing to study in the position where they can have a great help and contribution to the society.
Yeah,
they will be.
I echo that one. And Viet, final, what's your vision for future generations? Our generation.
Yeah, well, honestly, it's already happening. We have people like Viet and you, Celia, and other members like Claudia, Andrew, who are taking up leadership roles within the community, within the world of politics as well, which is really good. In terms of the story of the Vietnamese people, the Vietnamese Australian refugees, that will not ever be forgotten because we're still here. That's one. And the other thing, shameless plug, the Vietnamese Museum, which we're aiming to have really, really soon, and it's on its way. With that installed, and once the doors open, that is another way for us to keep our legacy alive and continue to give back to the community, give back to the country that has accepted us, while at the same time not trying to change us and make us strip ourselves of our Vietnamese identity.
Absolutely. Well said, Viet. On that note, thank you very much to Gonyu, Jalm and Viet for joining us as our guest speakers for tonight's panel discussion. 100% echo everything you've said. A great opportunity now for us to be interactive and be involved in a interactive activity together. For those of you who are not on the Slido page, jump on board. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to use the chat function on Zoom. I'd like for you all to be involved. We've got 40 people on this chat. My task to you is to write an open letter to our first generation. Whether that's a few sentences, a paragraph, or you're really super fast typer like I am, and you can write a full letter, go for it. It can be anonymous if you want it through Slido, or if you'd like your name on it, that's okay too. What we're going to do is collate all of your input into an open letter, and we really want to make this an open letter given to first generation Vietnamese people living all over the world about our gratitude, about our sense of gratitude and reflections of the different sacrifices that, you know, our parents and our first generation had made to us. I would like to wrap up this session by giving an opportunity for final comments and reflection that anyone in the 32 people who've joined us might want to have a say. If anyone would like to say anything before then, please do. Put yourself on unmute, and it's an opportunity for you to just jump on board to say a few words of reflection. Does anyone want to say anything?
If you don't mind, can I just have a few words, because I'm one of the oldest one in the group now, with the youngest people, that I would like you to continue working hard as your parents and contribute your skill to this country. Reach out to help other community as well. Keep your dual identity, not to forget about your roots. Have close connection with the Vietnamese community in Australia. Lastly, not to forget those who had less fortunate living in suppression, lack of democracy in Vietnam.
Thank you, Gunya. Really well said. Anyone would like to say final words? Or I'm going to pick from the list.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Bak Dron, Gonyu Hoang and Viet for sharing your stories, and also Celia for being a terrific facilitator of a Zoom. I know it's not easy. And to the DILP committee for putting on this session. I think it's a great privilege for myself to participate in such a reflective moment. So thank you everyone involved.
Definitely. Thank you, Andrew. If there's no one else, I'm going to pass back to the DILP team to wrap up, but thank you for having me on board, and I've definitely learned a lot every year. I continue to grow and reflect, and hearing from the different experiences of our first generation and our second generation has been a real honour, so thank you for having me. I might pass back to Jenny to wrap up.
Yes. Thank you so much to all those involved. Thank you to Celia for facilitating. Thank you to all of our panel speakers, Bak Dron, Gonyu Hoang and Viet. And of course, thank you all of you for joining as well. I think we can say that we have almost all of the DILP cohorts here. So that's really positive, and it's fantastic that we can come together to commemorate such a significant day and hear the experiences, especially coming from a first generation point of view. We can understand a lot more. I really hope that you all have been able to gain something really insightful from tonight. And we really hope that you continue to stay connected to the Vietnamese community and continue connecting with the first generation as much as you can. Thanks everyone for joining.